On March 14, 2019, campus security at Haverly University found something that would haunt them forever. Room 237 in the biology annex stood empty, the window wide open despite being on the 4th floor. The bed was soaked in blood, but there was no body, no struggle, no explanation. Just a single message scrawled on the mirror in what appeared to be dried blood. She invited me in. 23-year-old biology student Lena Martinez would become the last person to sleep in that building. What she discovered in those final nights would force the university to seal an entire wing, and the footage she left behind remains the most disturbing evidence of what students have been whispering about for decades. Some say it's an urban legend. The cameras tell a different story. This is what really happened in the Haverly Biology Annex, and why some students never made it to graduation. Lena Martinez transferred to Haverly University in January 2019, excited to join their prestigious biology program. She moved into the annex dormitory, a 1960s concrete structure attached to the biology labs, known for cheap rent and convenient access to research facilities. What the housing office didn't mention was the building's reputation. In 2017, freshman Ryan Chen disappeared from his third-floor room. His roommate woke up to find Ryan's bed empty, the window open, and strange scratch marks running down the interior wall. Ryan was never found. 6 months later, psychology student Emily Wade vanished from the second floor under identical circumstances. The university quietly relocated students and claimed gas leaks, but rumors spread like wildfire. Students talked about shadows that moved independently of any light source, about waking up exhausted with no memory of the night before, about whispers in empty hallways at 3:33 in the morning. Most dismissed it as college ghost stories, the kind every campus has. Lena didn't believe in any of it. She was a science major, rational, evidence-based. But within her first week, she noticed something was wrong. Her roommate Jessica would wake up pale and disoriented, complaining about vivid nightmares she couldn't quite remember. The heating system seemed broken, their room staying perpetually cold despite maintenance visits, and there were the shadows. Lena first noticed them on her third night. She was studying late, around 2 a.m., when she saw movement in her peripheral vision, a shadow on the wall that didn't match any object in the room, sliding slowly toward the corner before disappearing entirely. She chalked it up to exhaustion and caffeine. But it happened again the next night, and the night after that. By her second week, Lena decided to document everything. She was a scientist, after all. If something strange was happening, she would gather evidence. She set up 2 cameras in her room, one pointing at the door, one at the window. She started a log, noting every unusual occurrence with timestamps and descriptions. Cold spots near the window at 11:47 p.m., shadow movement along the north wall at 1:23 a.m., scratching sounds from inside the walls at 3:33 a.m., always at 3:33. Jessica thought she was being paranoid, but Lena kept recording. She had no idea she was documenting the final days of her own life in that building. March 13, 2019, changed everything. Lena woke at exactly 3:33 a.m. to a sound she would never forget. Scratching, not from inside the walls this time, but on the window glass. Long, deliberate scrapes like fingernails dragging down the pane. She sat up in the darkness, her heart pounding, and looked toward the window. The curtains were open, and beyond the glass she could see nothing but the darkness of a moonless night. They were on the 4th floor. There was no ledge, no fire escape, nothing that could support a person. The scratching continued, slow and methodical. Lena grabbed her phone, hands shaking, and turned on the flashlight. She pointed it at the window and saw nothing, but the scratching didn't stop. It grew louder, more insistent, and then she heard something that turned her blood to ice. A whisper, so soft she almost missed it, coming from just beyond the glass. "May I come in?" Lena scrambled backward, nearly falling out of bed. She looked over at Jessica's bed, ready to wake her roommate, and froze. Jessica's bed was empty. The sheets were pulled back as if she'd just gotten up, but Jessica was gone. The window, Lena now noticed, was open. Just a crack, maybe 2 inches, but it was open. She knew with absolute certainty she had locked it before bed. Lena ran to turn on the lights, her hands fumbling with the switch. The room flooded with harsh fluorescent brightness, and the scratching stopped immediately. The window stood still and silent, the curtains barely moving in the cold draft. Jessica was nowhere to be seen. Lena checked the bathroom, the hallway, even knocked on neighbors' doors, but no one had seen her roommate. Campus security was called at 3:47 a.m. They searched the building and found Jessica 2 hours later, unconscious in the laundry room on the first floor. She had no memory of leaving the room, no explanation for how she ended up 3 floors down. She was pale, almost grey, and complained of being exhausted despite supposedly sleeping all night. The paramedics found 2 small puncture marks on her neck, barely visible, which they assumed were insect bites. Jessica was taken to the campus health center for observation. Lena returned to her room as the sun was rising, and that's when she saw it. On the mirror above her dresser there were streaks, dark red streaks, like someone had dragged bloody fingers across the glass. But Lena had no cuts, no injuries. She touched the streaks cautiously, and her finger came away stained red. But it wasn't quite blood. It was thicker, darker, and it didn't smell like anything she'd ever encountered in her biology labs. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now, what Lena discovered on those security cameras would make her question everything she thought she knew about reality, and by the time she understood what was hunting in the biology annex, it would already be too late. Lena didn't go to class that day. She spent hours reviewing the footage from her cameras, and what she found made her hands shake so badly she could barely hold her laptop. At 3:31 a.m., 2 minutes before she woke up, her camera captured Jessica sitting up in bed. But Jessica's movements were wrong, mechanical, like a puppet being pulled by strings. She stood and walked to the window, her face completely blank. She unlocked it, pushed it open, and then just stood there, staring out into the darkness. For 2 full minutes, she didn't move. Then, at exactly 3:33, something appeared in the frame. It was a shadow, but it moved independently of any light source, sliding across the wall behind Jessica like liquid darkness. The shadow grew larger, darker, and then it seemed to reach toward Jessica. The girl's head tilted to the side, exposing her neck, and the shadow enveloped her completely. The camera glitched for exactly 3 seconds, and when it cleared, Jessica was gone. The window was still open, the curtains billowing in the wind, but the room was empty except for Lena, still asleep in her bed. Lena watched the footage 12 times, each viewing making her feel sicker. This wasn't a person breaking in. This wasn't anything that could be explained by science as she understood it. She reported the footage to campus security, but they seemed more confused than concerned. The head of security, Officer Mark Davidson, suggested it was a technical glitch, maybe doctored as a prank. But Lena wasn't the only one experiencing strange things anymore. Within 48 hours of Jessica's incident, 7 other students in the biology annex reported similar experiences. They woke up exhausted with gaps in their memory. They found their windows open despite locking them. They saw shadows moving in ways that defied physics. And 4 of them discovered the same puncture marks on their necks, small and neat, like they'd been made by something with surgical precision. The campus health center quietly began tracking these cases, but they had no medical explanation. The students' blood tests showed severe anemia, as if they'd lost significant amounts of blood, but there was no visible bleeding, no trauma beyond those tiny marks. How do you lose nearly 20% of your blood volume overnight without anyone noticing? One student, Marcus Thompson, a sophomore engineering major, set up his own cameras after waking up 3 nights in a row feeling like he'd run a marathon. His footage showed something that made the university administration convene an emergency meeting. At 3:33 a.m., Marcus's camera captured what looked like a humanoid figure moving along his wall. Not walking in the room, but gliding along the surface of the wall itself, as if gravity meant nothing to it. The figure was completely black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it, but the camera caught glimpses of details that seemed impossible. Eyes that glowed a deep crimson red, hands that ended in long, curved claws, and when the figure leaned down toward Marcus's sleeping form, The camera clearly captured what looked like fangs, long and sharp, extending from a mouth that opened far wider than any human jaw. Marcus never woke up during the encounter. The thing fed on him for nearly 10 minutes, and when it finally retreated back into the shadows, Marcus's neck bore fresh puncture wounds. The university couldn't suppress the footage. Students were scared. Parents were calling. Local news started asking questions about the Haverly sleepwalking epidemic. The administration's official statement blamed black mold and carbon monoxide, but they quietly began evacuating the biology annex, moving students to other dormitories, all except Lena. She refused to leave because she'd found something in the university archives, something that explained exactly what was hunting them, and she knew that moving students wouldn't stop it. The thing in the annex had been there for decades, and it was getting stronger. But what Lena discovered about the true nature of this creature and what it wanted would make her realize that she wasn't just documenting a paranormal event. She was its next target, and it had been watching her from the very beginning. In the basement of Haverly's main library, Lena found records that the university had tried very hard to bury. Maintenance logs from 1974, written by the building's original caretaker, a man named Ernest Holloway. The entries started normal, complaints about heating systems and student noise, but by October of that year, Holloway's handwriting became erratic, his entries disturbing. October 17, 1974, found student in basement unconscious, pale, no wounds visible, but he swears something bit him. Checked all rooms, found nothing. October 23, 1974, 3 more students ill. They all described the same nightmare, a shadow with red eyes that asks permission to enter. None of them remember saying yes, but they must have. It cannot enter uninvited. November 2nd, 1974. I saw it tonight, in the sub-basement near the old coal room. It is not human. It feeds on them while they sleep. I tried to trap it, but it moves through walls like smoke. The students call it a vampire, but it is older than that word. It is hungry, always hungry. The final entry was dated November 8, 1974, just 2 weeks before Ernest Holloway disappeared. I know how to stop it now. Salt, iron, and binding words spoken at the threshold. I will trap it in the old storage room. If anyone reads this and the disappearances continue, the seal has broken. Do not let it out. Do not invite it in. And whatever you do, do not go to the sub-basement at 3:33 in the morning. Lena sat in the dim library basement, her hands trembling as she read. The university had known about this for 50 years. They'd known students were disappearing, being attacked, drained, and they'd done nothing except suppress the information and hope the problem would solve itself. She looked up Ernest Holloway. He'd been found 3 weeks after his disappearance, dead in the sub-basement storage room. Official cause of death was heart failure, but the autopsy report, which Lena found buried in medical records, told a different story. Holloway's body was completely drained of blood, every single drop. His face was frozen in an expression of absolute terror, and on his neck were dozens of puncture wounds, as if whatever killed him had fed on him over and over. The storage room had been sealed after his death, the door welded shut and covered with drywall. But renovations in 2015, just 2 years before Ryan Chen disappeared, had broken that seal. They'd reopened the sub-basement to install new electrical systems. They'd cut through the old welded door and exposed the storage room, and they'd released whatever Ernest Holloway had died trying to contain. Lena knew what she had to do. She couldn't just run, couldn't just leave this thing to hunt other students. She was a scientist. She dealt in evidence and solutions, and according to Holloway's notes, there was a way to contain it again. That night, March 15th at 11:47 p.m., Lena descended into the sub-basement of the biology annex. The university had evacuated all students except her, and security was spread thin, dealing with the media circus outside. She was alone. She carried salt, iron filings, and a printed copy of Holloway's binding ritual. She'd also brought every camera she owned. If she died tonight, at least there would be evidence. The sub-basement was exactly as Holloway had described it. Long concrete corridors lit by failing fluorescent tubes, old storage rooms filled with abandoned lab equipment, and at the very end, the room. Someone had hastily rebuilt the wall after the 2015 renovations, but Lena could see where the old welded door had been cut through. There were scratch marks on the new drywall coming from inside the room, as if something had been trying to claw its way out. Lena set up her cameras, creating a circle of salt and iron at the threshold of the room. According to Holloway, the creature was bound to this location, tied to the space where it had first been summoned decades ago. It could move through the building, but it always returned here. It had to. At 3:33 a.m., Lena began the binding ritual, reading the words Holloway had written. The temperature dropped so fast she could see her breath crystallizing in the air. The lights began to flicker and dim, and then she heard it. Footsteps, but not from inside the sealed room, from behind her, in the corridor. Lena turned slowly, her heart hammering in her chest, and saw it clearly for the first time. The thing that had been hunting Haverly students for 50 years stood 15 feet away, and it was nothing like the monsters in movies. It was humanoid in shape, about 6 feet tall, but its proportions were wrong. Its arms were too long, ending in hands with fingers that curved into razor-sharp claws. Its skin was black, not brown or dark, but actually black, like it absorbed all light. Its face was gaunt, almost skeletal, with sunken cheeks and a lipless mouth that revealed rows of needle-sharp teeth. And its eyes glowed a deep, arterial red, fixed on Lena with an intelligence that was terrifying in its clarity. This wasn't a mindless monster. It was thinking, calculating, hunting. "You know what I am," it said, and its voice was like dry leaves scraping across concrete. "You carry his words, the old caretaker. He trapped me once." Lena's throat was so dry she could barely speak. "You're a vampire, a blood demon, something that shouldn't exist." The creature's mouth stretched into something that might have been a smile. "I am hunger. I am the shadow in the corner of your eye. I have fed in this place since before your grandparents were born, and you think you can bind me again?" It moved, and Lena didn't even see it cross the distance. One moment it was 15 feet away, the next it was right in front of her, its face inches from hers. She could smell it now, a scent like old copper and decay. "But you made a mistake," Lena whispered, forcing herself to meet those red eyes. "You've been feeding on students for months, growing stronger, but you've also been revealing yourself. I have footage, evidence, documentation, and I've lured you here, back to your anchor point, right into the binding circle." The creature looked down and seemed to notice for the first time that it was standing in the salt and iron circle Lena had created. Its expression changed, the smile vanishing, replaced by something like rage. "You clever little thing," it hissed, "but binding words only work if I cannot escape the circle, and I am very, very old. I know how to—" Lena didn't let it finish. She threw the remaining salt directly into its face and ran for the door. Behind her, she heard a shriek that wasn't quite human, a sound of pure fury and hunger. She reached the corridor and grabbed the metal door she'd prepared earlier, a reinforced steel security door she'd stolen from a campus storage facility. With strength she didn't know she had, Lena swung the door closed and slammed home 3 iron deadbolts. The creature hit the door so hard the entire wall shook. Lena fell backward, scrambling away as the door buckled and bent, but it held, barely. From behind the steel, she could hear it screaming, clawing, and eventually the sound of something wet and heavy hitting the floor. The binding hadn't worked perfectly. She hadn't contained it forever like Holloway intended. But she'd trapped it long enough, weakened it enough with the salt and iron that it had retreated back to its anchor point. The storage room. The place where it was born. Lena staggered to her feet and ran. She didn't stop running until she was outside the building, collapsing on the cold grass as the sun began to rise. Campus security found her there, barely conscious, her hands still clutching her camera. The footage she'd captured that night would never be made public, but it was enough to convince the university to permanently seal the entire sub-basement. They didn't tear down the building. They couldn't risk releasing whatever was trapped down there. Instead, they filled the sub-basement with concrete, welded shut every access point, and officially closed the biology annex for structural concerns. But Lena knew the truth, and so did the students who'd survived. The thing wasn't destroyed. It couldn't be killed. It was only contained, trapped once again in its own lair, waiting for the day when someone might accidentally break the seal. Again. Lena Martinez transferred out of Haverly University 3 days after the incident. She finished her biology degree at another school and refuses to discuss what happened in the annex with anyone except her therapist. Jessica, her former roommate, has no memory of that night and considers herself lucky. The 7 other students who were attacked have all recovered physically, though several still experience nightmares about red eyes in the darkness. Marcus Thompson dropped out entirely and moved across the country. He won't go into any building with a basement. The biology annex stands empty today, a concrete monument surrounded by warning signs and chain-link fencing. The university's official story is contamination and structural damage, but students know better. They tell stories about what's buried beneath that building, about the vampire that still hunts in the darkness of its concrete prison, and they warn each other about the rules that must never be broken. Never open a window after midnight, never invite anything in, even if it sounds human, and never ever be alone in an old building at 3:33 in the morning, because some things that hunger never truly die, they only wait. Maintenance workers occasionally report strange sounds coming from beneath the sealed building, scratching, whispers, and sometimes when the wind is right, students walking past late at night swear they can hear it. A voice, faint and dry, calling out from the darkness beneath their feet. "May I come in, please? I'm so hungry. Won't someone please invite me in?" In 2021, 2 years after Lena's escape, a freshman tried to break into the abandoned annex on a dare. He was found unconscious near the fence, with 2 puncture marks on his neck and no memory of what happened. The university increased security and installed additional concrete barriers. But every few months, someone else tries to get close. Curiosity is a powerful force, and the thing beneath the concrete is patient. It has been hungry before, it can be hungry again, it has nowhere to go. Haverly University will never tear down that building. They can't risk disturbing the seal. So it stands, empty and watching, a reminder that some mysteries are better left buried. Some doors should stay closed, and some invitations should never be accepted. How would you feel if you woke up to find your roommate gone and blood on your mirror? What would you do if you discovered something inhuman was hunting you in your own dorm? Think about that tonight when you hear sounds in the dark. Think about whether your window is locked and whether you've ever, even accidentally, invited something in. Because in old buildings with long histories, you never really know what's waiting in the shadows. You never know what's listening when you speak, and you never know what hungers in the darkness just beyond your door, waiting for that one moment of weakness, that one careless invitation. The vampire of Haverly University is still down there, still trapped, still hungry, and it will wait for as long as it takes. Some students never leave the dorms they move into. Not really. Some become part of the building itself, their fear and blood soaking into the walls. And some, like Lena, escape just in time. But they never forget. They never truly leave either. Because once you've looked into those red eyes, once you've felt that cold breath on your neck, once you've heard that dry whisper asking for permission to enter, a part of you stays trapped in that moment forever. This was the Haverly Biology Annex, the place where Ryan Chen vanished, where Emily Wade disappeared, where 23 students were attacked by something that science says cannot exist. The university sealed it. The media forgot about it. But the students remember, and they whisper warnings to every freshman who arrives on campus. Stay away from the old annex. Don't walk past it alone at night. And if you ever hear a voice calling from the darkness, asking to be let in, asking for an invitation, run. Because some hungers can never be satisfied, some shadows never fade, and some vampires never truly die. They only wait, always hungry, always watching, always ready for the next invitation. This is the final chapter of the Missing Students series, 3 disappearances, 1 predator, and the truth that Haverly University buried beneath concrete and lies. Remember their names. Remember their faces. And remember that monsters are real. They just hide better than we want to believe. If this story made you feel something, if it made you check your windows tonight, leave a comment below. Share this video so others can know the truth. And whatever you do, never invite the darkness in, because it's always listening, and it's always hungry. Hit that subscribe button. Episode 4 will be premiering hours from now.